Hello, how are you? For as much as we all like to moan about remasters and remakes, one recent trend that I've been absolutely loving recently is long-awaited sequels to games that were loved a while back. I'm talking the soft reboot of God of War, Stalker 2, Metroid Prime 4, Alan Wake 2, and so many more. But in particular, for this video, I'm talking Warhammer 40k Space Marine 2. This game is shaping up to be something spectacular. It really is. The original Space Marine back in 2011 was my introduction to the Warhammer universe. Having played the Gears of War games, it felt a little familiar, but there was something about it that just really clicked with me back then. The weaponry, the guts, and just this first experience of this Warhammer universe was so much fun to me. Now, 13 years later, wowee by the way, we're getting ourselves a sequel. Published by Focus Entertainment, who have a terrific eye for great video games, and developed by Saber Interactive, now the home of my beloved KOTOR remake. Today, I want to talk about some things that you need to know about Space Marine 2 and why it's one of my most anticipated games for the rest of 2024. As usual, if you enjoyed the video, my thoughts, or you're just excited like me, clicking the like button would help me out. And if you're after coverage for Space Marine 2, I'll be all over this at launch, so consider subscribing. With that said, let's dive in. I think one thing that sounds a lot like criticism, but bear with me, this game is old-fashioned, and I mean that in the best way possible. The Xbox 360 PS3 era was defined by many great single-player games that had fun modes tacked onto them. Video games are at a point now where you used to look at Assassin's Creed or The Last of Us, and they'd come with these multiplayer offerings. But the scope of video games is now so big, the most recent iterations of those franchises are now just campaigns. Space Marine 2 on the other hand is bold in that we're getting a single player campaign that can be played with 2 others or on your own, a PvE co-op mode known as Operations with 6 playable classes to pick and choose from and optimize that loadout, and a PvP mode. It feels traditional in all the best ways that only really Call of Duty, Halo and Gears have these kind of offerings now. I've missed that. So let's break each of these down a little bit more, because that's where my excitement lies, in the juicy details of each of these modes. The campaign then. This can be played solo or with 2 other people. If you want to solo it, you'll have AI alongside you. And from what we've seen of it, it just looks bombastic, you know? We're a little light on ultra specific details. There were some hands-on previews for the game both last year and at the recent Summer Games Fest, and everyone that's played it is feeling really good about this one. The tech involved is astounding, man. It really is. The amount of enemies that are on screen at once feels like a showcase of current gen consoles and hardware. I'm not going to sit here well versed in the lore and the campaign, and I am not particularly after some deeply grounded and emotional story. I'm here to tear shit up, and that's exactly what it looks like we're going to be doing. The Tyrannid Hordes feels like something out of a tech demo where it's like, alright, look how many enemies we can have on screen at once. But the gore and the punchiness of the weapons looks fantastic too. The combat looks to be very, very visceral. I think what attracts me most about the Warhammer games though, as someone who loved Darktide, is that they feel so digestible. Whenever I've thought about where to start with Warhammer, I'm like immediately overwhelmed. The original Space Marine was a lovely introduction, and I expect Space Marine 2 to really deliver again that bite-sized and digestible narrative in this 40k universe, which I imagine will feel very rich to long-time Warhammer fans, but enjoyable to the extreme casuals like me. In that limited time that I've had with the Warhammer games, I'm always floored by the environmental design, as it being some of the coolest shit going. Space Marine 2 is shaping up to be more of the same. Huge set pieces, gorgeous internal environments, and a variety of biomes that we're going to be traversing within. On to the PvE then. This is where I'm all excited, man. So we've got 6 classes. As a Destiny 2 player, Suicide Squad player, I love me some loot, but most of all, some build crafting. Speccing into my kind of Space Marine, you know? The 6 classes that are on offer being Tactical, Assault, Vanguard, Bulwark, Sniper and Heavy. Might have butchered one there. What's neat is that the post-launch content coming in what they call the Operations mode is going to be free to all owners of the game. Monetization on the other hand is a little bit confusing, The developers recently came out and said that there's going to be no in-game store or microtransactions, but the only paid DLC is going to be cosmetic only. Which is like, is that microtransactions, or is that basically saying, hey, we're going to have some kind of battle pass? But is that not a microtransaction? I don't know. It's a bit like, I'm not too sure about where this one's heading. But again, it just goes back to what I was saying. If we're going to be getting free content, I think that's a fair trade-off. But it's definitely one to keep an eye on when it comes to cosmetics, because we have to make sure we're watching these things. I know that these operations are basically a live service format, and people can roll their eyes at that, but I always think there's a lot of potential with these. Especially if these operations can serve up some really interesting story on top of the main campaign and give you a good variety of missions and modes to dive into. This was something that in particular was a miss for me when it came to Darktide, and why I bounced off that game quite quickly. The operations themselves will take place simultaneously with the campaign's main story, and from the gameplay that you've seen on screen, there's a moment where a Space Marine just fully dropkicks an enemy, and that's what I'm all about. Having 6 classes to mess around with and swap between is the kind of variation that I love, especially with tailoring that playstyle to your own kind of playstyle. It's not predetermined, and there's customization within each playstyle, so being able to experiment is always one of the most fun aspects in here. In the operations mode, it looks as though we'll get tiers of loot too, which is going to improve as you level up for your XP from completing these missions. These 6 classes will also be a part of the game's PvP, a 6v6 multiplayer mode where again you'll have fully customization, weapons and armor. PvP isn't really my thing anymore, but if my friends who are wanting to play this game with me want to dive into some PvP, I'll dive in for sure. But it just goes back to what I was saying. There's such a breadth of content to look forward to, no matter what kind of player you are. And for the cosmetics that they have shown, they all look really cool if you're asking me. But the meat of the content is where it's at. The gameplay. I mentioned a little bit, but it's so visceral. But I think it's that main gameplay loop that's really exciting me. In the gameplay overview trailer which dropped last week at the time of recording this vid, we saw that armor and health is recovered through performing melee finishes, which means we're going to have to strategize a bit in terms of when to perform one, to make sure that we're not getting overwhelmed when trying to perform one. It's about, alright, conserving ammo here, and it just adds that layer of challenge of really mapping out how you're going to deal with these hordes, rather than it always just feeling mindless. Snipers obviously are going to take a more long range approach, Vanguard are going to be straight up grappling onto an enemy and drop kicking him. Overall though, I think that Warhammer Space Marine 2 is shaping up to be a sleeper hit. Everyone that I know that knows about this game is extremely excited. In terms of a huge mainstream buzz, not yet. Though I do think that that will come. Space Marine 2 is easily one of my most anticipated games for the rest of the year. It drops on September 9th for the standard edition, and for the 2 premium editions, 4 days early access. So we don't have too much more of a wait. Yeah, that's why I'm excited for Space Marine 2, a bit of an overview of what to expect, and maybe why you should feel excited too. But I've spoken enough about what I think. Now I want to know, what do you think? Was this game already on your radar? If it wasn't, is it now? How excited are you feeling, and did you play the first? Let's talk in the comments down below. I'd love to hear from you. Like I said, if you're after coverage of this game when it drops in early September, consider subscribing for guides and other coverage on the game. And if you enjoyed this vid, dropping a like is a big way to help me out, so I'd appreciate it. Other than that, I hope you have a terrific day, look after yourself, and I'll catch you in the next one.